There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, man. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotating.
All right, that was a video released by the Department of Defense that shows a Navy jet crew's encounter with a UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, more commonly known as UFOs. The government has been releasing more videos like these as part of a new office working to detect these sightings and then share information with the public. Joining us now, New York Times best-selling author Garrett M. Graff. His new book is entitled UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government's Search for Alien Life Here and Out There. It's good to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Congratulations on the book. It's broken up into three. I don't know if this is a good way to start, but I want to understand what you've done here. Broken up into three parts: the saucer age, the space age, and the interstellar age. What does that mean? What are you looking at? And is there life out there?
So the math is on the side of the aliens, and that's one of the biggest transformations in astronomy and science over the last 20 years.
Okay.
In the 1990s, we did not know that there was a single other planet outside of our solar system. We now believe effectively every star in the universe has habitable planets. There are roughly, by the latest estimates, a sextillion habitable planets across the universe. That's 1,000 trillion. Habitable
trillion.
1,000 trillion.
Okay.
So life could be rare, but do you really think it's a 1 in sextillion chance? So this book tries to weave together sort of twin threads of the U.S. military's hunt for UFOs here, which dates back to the sort of the early days of the Cold War, the dawn of the flying saucer age, 1947, Roswell sort of incidents that people are familiar with, and then the sort of evolving astronomy science that shows that life is probably actually quite common out there across the universe.
Garrett, we have a sectillion questions.
1 in 6. We could have applied that to the New York Jets' chances
Yes.
of the Super Bowl. The last segment, it does seem like there's been a really sharp increase in people thinking they've seen them. Now, some of that could probably be attributable to people having cameras, right? So you can sort of, but it also seems like the government is suddenly being way more forthcoming about these things. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so that's actually what got me interested in this subject was you now see sort of serious people talking seriously about this subject. I sort of started this book in my mind in December 2020. John Brennan, someone you all know, gave this interview to Tyler Cowen, the Economist journalist, where he says, basically, there's something flying around up there. We don't know what it is, and it puzzles me. And I was like, John Brennan had just wrapped up the better part of a decade as a CIA director, White House Homeland Security advisor. There probably aren't that many things that puzzle John Brennan.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most credible sighting or instance that you've come across of a UFO as revealed by your sources?
Yeah, so part of the challenge is UFOs are real. All they are an unidentified flying object. And I think that they sort of broadly break down in 4 categories. You have adversary technology being tested against us, Chinese drones, Russian drones.
You never know, right?
You've got a bunch of sort of weird sky clutter flying around up there. I mean, that's basically what we ended up with a Chinese spy balloon in February, was the government was like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff up there, let's shoot it all down. And then you end up with the weird categories. And I think that is a mix of atmospheric, meteorological, and astronomical phenomenon that we don't understand. And then I think, and this is the really weird stuff, I think that there's physics that we don't understand yet that are going to reveal some chunk of what the answer to UAPs and UFOs actually are.
On that physics part, do you think that government, now that they are becoming, as you talk about in the book, more open to talking about the existence of UFOs, do you think government will get to the point of trying to explore exactly what these UFOs are going back to, what kind of life? We may not understand it as our kind of life. When do we start making it real, and rather than speculate on what it could be?
Yeah, so that to me is part of this really interesting shift that we've seen in the last couple of years is the U.S. government sort of trying to talk a little bit more openly about this. To me, though, there is a government cover-up about UFOs. It's just not the one that most people think it is. And that the government, I think, at the end of the day, is covering up its ignorance about what this phenomenon actually is. That it's not that there's sort of a secret hangar under Area 51, a la Independence Day. It's the government, that John Brennan's right, that there's weird stuff up there. It puzzles us. We don't know what it is. And the government sort of is trying to not tell us that it fundamentally doesn't know.
And Mika, I think if the government was covering up the existence of aliens, Trump would have just blurted it out.
Of course.
So,
or he's got the documents down at Mar-a-Lago talking about them. No, but so do we find out, do we get closer to knowing by reading this book?
I think you do. Okay. And I think that the dawning math and the evolution of sort of what we are going to discover in the next couple of decades is going to fundamentally transform the way that we think about ourselves and our cosmic consciousness.
The new book is entitled UFO, The Inside Story of the U.S. Government's Search for Alien Life Here and Out There. Garrett Graff, thank you so much. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And congratulations on the book. And